presenter right there. So our next presenter is Gethzi, and her presentation is based on, it's a chapter in your thesis, the Expulsion. Oh, well, I won't say any more because it's already up there for you on the board. So, Gethzi.
Thank you, Damien. Good afternoon to you all. And as Damien introduced, I'm Gethzi. I submitted my thesis 4 years before, so for 5 years before 2014 December. So it may be a bit tricky to answer all the questions that you asked to begin with. So anyway, but I'll do my best. But this will be an overview of my thesis that has been submitted a long time back. Not long time, yeah, but it's still fresh though. Yeah. Maybe in this thesis.
Just
This one?
you use that one left to right. Oops. Sorry?
Sorry.
Okay, so get rid of this. Just fix that. Just go forwards together.
In this thesis, I have read Ezra chapters 9 to 10 from a Dalit perspective by employing a Dalit hermeneutic. My aim is to receive new dimensions from the text, and therefore I attempted to retrieve the voices of the women of the land identified in the text as unclean. To effect this retrieval, my first task was to develop a Dalit hermeneutic. My interpretative strategies are formulated in part by incorporating feminist hermeneutics, and Dalit culture and Dalit experiences of harsh realities are also taken into account in the formulation of the hermeneutic. What is and why a Dalit hermeneutic? As we all are aware, and maybe from the Indian context, Western theology has greatly influenced the preaching and teachings of biblical texts in India. Attempts to indigenize Western theology have resulted in a theology from above, taking into account the experiences and understandings of the elite interpreters. A gradual realization that such a theology is not sufficient to meet the unique spiritual needs of the majority of Indian Christians, the Dalits, has led to a Dalit theology being slowly introduced into theological education. Dalit theology is an emerging field of study, and Dalit hermeneutics is being recognized as an important area of research in recent years. And when I said that majority of the church, it means many Dalit scholars have pointed to nearly 200 million Indian citizens are the Dalits who come to the church. Who are the Dalits actually in Indian society? The Dalits are those who experience isolation, desolation, and segregation based on the concepts of sacredness and purity as prescribed by the caste system of Hindu religion. The caste system is a system of social stratification and is unique to Indian society. It is built on the premises of inequality and violates the universal principle of equal justice for all. The systematic hierarchical order has the Brahmins in the top layer, followed by Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and Shudras. The Purusha Shukta hymn in the Rig Veda of the Hindu religion divides the creation of human being into 4 classes known as the Varnas, namely Brahmin, the priestly the Kshatriyas, born for ruling, and Vaishyas, the traders, and Shudras, the servants. Because of the ideology of Brahminic superiority, a vast number of people do not fit into this caste structure and are hence designated outcasts because they don't have place in the caste, so they are outcasts. Furthermore, they are considered as polluted and polluting creatures. While the first three castes, the Brahmins, Kshatriya and Vaishyas, are considered as the pure and the twice born, the Shudra was considered as impure. Manu, the divine lawgiver, marks off Dalits as unseeable, unapproachable, and untouchable. With religious sanctions and through ages, this hierarchical four-tier graded ladder has become extremely rigid, making any vertical mobility in the society, in the social hierarchy, almost impossible. So, as a consequence, the outcasts are not only segregated and isolated from other caste groups, but also endure many forms of oppression and humiliation. So, after becoming aware of their inhumane conditions resulting from their oppression and exploitation, many of the outcasts have adopted the name Dalit. So they are the Dalits. The outcasts, untouchables are the Dalits. The term Dalit does not mean or refer to a caste, but describes the crushed condition that Dalits endure as outcasts. The Hebrew term Dal, which means weak and frail, and the Dalit and the Sanskrit term Dalit both had similar connotations and meanings. So the condition of the Dalits as oppressed, broken, subordinated, crushed and split is expressed by this term. Why did I choose Ezra and Nehemiah for a Dalit reading? The books of Ezra and Nehemiah reveal a theological understanding of restoration based on an ideological development which was not known in earlier texts. So when the exiles returned from Babylon, the restoration took place, that restoration took place on a certain ideological belief. According to the narrator of Ezra and Nehemiah, the returned exiles are the only true Israel. And that claim is based on the belief that they viewed exile as punishment from Yahweh. When they were deported from the land of Canaan and the promised land to the land of Babylon, they considered that as a punishment from Yahweh. And because they endured that punishment, they are the purified group. They are purified because they have endured the punishment. So they, some of the returned exiles, and especially those, the elite group or the ruling group, they considered themselves as the only true Israel. And people who were left behind in Palestine, in the land, they were considered as impure because they considered themselves as pure. They are the true Israel, and therefore the others are not. Because they remained in the land, they didn't endure the punishment of Yahweh, and therefore they are not purified. They were not purified. So the group considered the rest of the Israelites who did not go into exile in Babylon as impure. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah explicitly focus on and legitimate the discrimination and oppression based on the ideology of pure impure, an ideology that is also basic to Dalit segregation in the Indian context. Ezra 9 to 10 primarily focuses on the problem of intermarriage of the returned exiles with the people of the land. The plot develops gradually with verse 1 pointing to the intermarriage and verse 44, the expulsion. So it gradually developed until the problem is resolved with the expulsion. The events and situations described in these two chapters parallel closely the Dalit context. According to popular thought, the Dalits are those who are born as the result of intermarriage between the upper three castes with Shudras. The three pure with the impure. The report of intermarriage in Ezra 9 to 10 is about three groups of people: the priests, the Levites, and the people of Israel returning from exile, and the impure the people who remained in the land. So the parallel between these two social worlds, those of the Dalits and the unclean in Ezra 9 to 10, offers an opportunity to reread this text from the perspective of these expelled and divorced women, an approach that interpreters have not pursued. According to Ambedkar, the father of Indian Constitution, who was also a Dalit himself, maintains that the caste system cannot be said to have grown as a means of preventing a mixture of races or as a means of maintaining purity of blood. So the claim in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, particularly in chapters 9 to 10, is maintaining of the holy seed. So the purity of blood has been related to that. And the methodology that I employed to read this text from a Dalit perspective takes into account three critical approaches, as I have mentioned before: socio-historical, narrative, and reader response criticism. These approaches relate to the world behind the text, the world within the text, and the world in front of the text. To put it simple, the methodology takes into account the three worlds of biblical interpretation. So the world behind the text, this analysis or the exploration of this world includes a study of social, cultural, and religious world of the historical period portrayed in the text. That is the world behind the text. So the analysis, maybe I'll go back again. Yeah. The analysis of this world includes a biblical portrayal of those who remained in the land, how biblical authors have portrayed or have seen people who were left behind in Judah during the Babylonian period, when others were taken into exile into Babylon. And scholarly research and views about those who remained in Judah. It's not only the biblical writer's view, how do scholars view those who remained in Judah? And portrayal of those who remained in the land according to the book of Ezra, because that denotes a different period, which is the Persian rule. So Persian period, and the interpreter's view of those who remained in the land during that period. It is a continuous period. There is no there is no disconnectivity or from the period Babylonian. The exile started with Babylonians, and it also continued during the Persian period. So that's why those periods have been explored. Yeah. And in exploring that period, I have chosen three important descriptions that was used in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. So the first expression or description used to denote the people who were left behind, or people who were with whom the people who returned, or the returnees, intermarried. They were described as the peoples of the lands, Ameha Arzoth, and the enemies or adversaries, Zarim, and Amha Aretz, the people of the land. So these are the three significant descriptions or expressions used in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, used by the narrator of Ezra and Nehemiah. An analysis of these descriptions offered insights into the social world of the people of the land, as projected or presented by the perspective of the narrator, from the perspective of the narrator. In my investigating the socio-historical context of the text, possible parallels and perspectives in the world behind the text had become apparent as I read from a Dalit perspective, because it has connotations with the Dalit world as well. So when that exploration has led to that. And the world within the text. This step involves a detailed narrative analysis of the text under consideration. The point of departure for developing a Dalit hermeneutic is a narrative analysis with a focus on narrative techniques utilized by the narrator. This narrative analysis establishes textual basis for applying a Dalit hermeneutic as well. So in this analysis, I have taken into account plot, central theme and point of view, rhetorical features and characters. So those 4 narrative techniques that I have taken and I have analyzed them. And especially with the characters, as it is, I'm not going to do the other 3, but especially with the characters, my analysis was guided by a range of questions that include: what are the actions in the plot? How are the actions connected? Is there a complication or a conflict within the plot? How is the conflict or complication resolved? Who will be the beneficiaries and who will be the losers in this resolution? What actions are given prominence and what actions are neglected or omitted? Who are the key characters in the plot and how are these characters portrayed? Who is the central character? Who are the round types and who are the flat types? How are the characters portrayed? Are there any special descriptions? What characters have been given voice? And who are silenced? Who acts? Who sees? Who speaks? Who remains silent? So all these questions have guided me in this analysis. This array of questions provide the necessary background to present a Dalit interpretation effectively. This analysis has enabled to appreciate those domains in the world of the narrative with which Dalits could empathize. And the world of the narrative, world behind the text and the world in front of the text intersects, as well as world within the text and world in front of the text intersects. So that's how that led to an effective Dalit hermeneutic. Yeah. Before going to that, so how a Dalit reading would look like if I focus on this type of analysis. For example, the women of the land, they are the ones who's been expelled, and so focusing on that character, they are the silent voices as well. The characters of the women of the land are flat and static. Though these characters are present in the narrative from the beginning to the end, the reader hardly recognizes their presence. These characters are not given any speech or action, they are silent. As characters, they are characterized by the reader through other characters' speech. They don't have the other characters portray them. So they are implicitly described as unclean with abominations by the officials when they brought the report to Ezra, and Ezra himself. Shechaniah, another character, and Ezra and the assembly describe the women explicitly as foreign wives. The description of the women of the land as foreign wives is also seen in the narrator's report. So it's all from the other characters and the narrator that they have been portrayed, that those characters don't have a stand on their own. Because this character is not given any speech, characterization solely depends on particular description in the narrative. Nothing of the social status of the women of the land as character is made explicit in the text. Thus, these characters become superficial agents to serve the plot. This character group, therefore, is designed in such a way that the reader would not take any special notice of them or identify with them and may well ignore them. Based on my understanding and experience of the oppression of the Dalit culture, it is possible to identify with the people of the land and in particular the women of the land. So, therefore, even though others couldn't listen to this character, reading from a Dalit perspective, I could listen empathetically to their silenced voices, these voices that are deserved to be retrieved. Right? front of the text. This analysis incorporates a study of the contemporary world of the Dalits. As a Dalit reader, it is necessary to analyze Dalit world in detail in order to explore possible relationships between relevant features of Dalit world and the world of the text and the world behind the text. This study outlines the present condition of Dalits in India, the exploration of three key areas: the context, the experience and the language contribute to the analysis of the Dalit world. This analysis identifies the context that keeps Dalit in inhumane conditions, oppressive Dalit experiences, the experience of oppression, shame, alienation, and the life struggles of the Dalits, and the language the caste-oriented people employ to address Dalits, or how with derogatory terms and things. This analysis had highlighted components of the Dalit world that resonate with components within or behind the world. In this study, it is obvious that because of the oppressive structure of the caste system sanctioned by Hindu religion and promoted by the contemptuous ideology of pure pollution, Dalits are still socially segregated, isolated, and economically deprived. For example, every Indian village is divided into two parts. One is called the Ur, or the main part where the caste people will live, and the other is called the Cheri, or it's a derogatory term for the place where the Dalits live, and it is totally separated from. So every Indian village, even today, is divided into two parts. So that's how the segregation, the total separation is. The continuous experience of oppression, exploitation, and exclusion over centuries causes Dalits to lose their self-confidence and become socially paralyzed. Even though some Dalits become assertive and raise their voices against the injustices they face, any uprising of the Dalits in quest for fuller humanity is suppressed by unjust, tyrannical, or powerful structures. Dalits in India today are still struggling for liberty, equality, and fraternity, a dream envisioned by Ambedkar long ago. So, this analysis contributes to an understanding of the context of Ezra 9 to 10. The women of the land are shamed, alienated, and rejected. They struggle for life, and derogatory language is used to describe them. This understanding will further contribute to a retrieval of the voices and experiences of the women of the land in the light of Dalit experience. So those are the three words, and its exploration or analysis. So the Dalit reading, actual Dalit reading, the Dalit hermeneutic that I have developed to read the narrative of Ezra 9 and 10 incorporates three hermeneutical steps. As I have mentioned before, insights from feminist hermeneutics had been gained to develop this interpretation, to develop this hermeneutic. So the first step, as the feminists do, is the Dalit hermeneutic of suspicion. That is, that the text and its interpreters reflect the orientation, the values, and world of the educated elite in power rather than that of the disenfranchised. Because of the elite orientation, they maintain a distance from some characters and may not exhibit an empathetic reading or show an appropriate level of interest in the oppressed characters in the text. The voices and values of the oppressed in the text, therefore, will probably not be heard or represented in these readings. As I mentioned before, so that will give me an opportunity to pay specific attention to the language portrayal of characters because they are alienated, or because they maintain, the narrator and the interpreters maintain a level of distance. That distance could be broken by those who read from below, from the perspective of the Dalits. And the second step is identification, that leads to identification. That in the light of Dalit experience, seek to identify with non-elite marginal characters in the text that experience alienation, shame and oppression. Because of the suspected elite perspective of the narrator and the interpreters, the experiences and the identity of the oppressed in the text may not be given due attention in their writing or glossed over as insignificant. Sometimes they could gloss over because it is not their experience. Because of their experiences, they may tend to identify with leading characters with significant power and status and detach themselves from the oppressed characters. So, for example, in analyzing the report of the officials, is it time or shall I? In analyzing the reports of the officials in Ezra 9, chapter 9, verses 1 to 2, most interpretations tend to support the separation and expulsion of the women of the land based on the notion, holy seed, focusing on the returnees and identifying with those leading characters. This language, which identifies the returnees as holy or pure, and the people of the land, especially the women, as abomination, people with abomination or unclean, is all too familiar in a Dalit world, where Dalits endure a total separation based on the ideology of pure impure, holy abominable, or clean unclean. Based on this, in the rereading of the text, it is easy to identify with the women of the land, who are portrayed as abominable creatures and unclean, and who are forcibly separated from their husbands. That's their final destiny, with their children. Through identification, I sought to retrieve their experiences. So, suspicion leads to identification. That identification is based on the experiences that they face as well. So, and the second step leads to the third step, which is the retrieval. Identification with marginalized characters leads to retrieval. That is the third step in my Dalit hermeneutic. Because of Dalit perspective and experiences, the textual narrator and the interpreters consider these marginal characters not only as insignificant, but their voices are also silenced or suppressed. This step offers the possibility of retrieving the experiences of marginalized and silenced voices of the oppressed who deserve to be heard in the light of the voices and experiences of Dalits. So, I effect this retrieval by identifying with Sarah, a representative of the women of the land, taking into account the findings of these three worlds of the text, and in the light of Dalit experience, I empathize with those characters that have been ignored as insignificant by the interpreters, or is not relevant to the scope of their writing because of their identification with the leading characters. By retrieving these expressions of Sarah's voice, sorry, that's my phone, I hope to support the struggle for liberation of Dalits, because there are some characters which raise their opposition, but those characters, that is not implicit, that is not explicit in the text. It simply said Jonathan and so didn't support this view or didn't support what the plan is. It says like that, but no furthermore explanation on that. But almost all interpreters had taken into account that they wanted Ezra to make the plan as quick as possible. That is the opposition that they make. So there is a plan, like 3-month plan to take account of all those who had intermarried with the people of the land. And after that it says, Jonathan and Jehoshua, they opposed this plan, or opposed this. But all interpreters said what they opposed is actually supporting the view of Ezra. That is, asking him to do it faster, not 3 months period. They wanted to do it faster, so quicker. So that means there is nothing more in the text. So, but that gives me an opportunity to identify with those characters as the real opposition to the plan of divorce. So, slides, but I have, in my reading, I have analyzed various Hebrew terminologies that is familiar with the Dalit culture, like separation, badal, and abomination, and holy seed, nidda, unclean. So these are the terms that being used to describe the women of the land, and toba, abomination. So all these things, so there are many terms that's been, and foreign women. So the progression goes like, initially they were not identified as foreign women, they were identified as people of the land, and then in the next chapter they were identified as foreign women. So that is just persuading to make that divorce effective. Several terminologies had been used to consider them as not the one who belonged to the group of the returned exiles. So, and yeah, that is my thesis about. If you are interested, you can read my thesis later. But this is the overview of my thesis. I didn't go into more of these details, but just to give you a glimpse of how it looks like and how it proceeds. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gethzi. Questions for Gethzi? You don't escape that easily.
Yes, Gethzi.
Yes, I find that absolutely fascinating, and I wonder about two things really. One is the whole idea of intermarriage. I think that's come through for me as, you know, I really, from how you described it, because I've no knowledge, no background knowledge about the subject, but it seems to me that's a very important element in both Dalit experience and the experience of the people of the land. So I thought that was interesting. And would probably merit lots of extra exploration. And the other thing that I found fascinating was the idea of retrieval, because within feminist theology there is a form of feminist hermeneutics. There is a form of narrative retrieval where you can actually create the stories. Now, then, obviously it's not scripture, but it's a way of giving life and giving expression to the lives of people whose stories have been suppressed. And I wondered if you had entered into that.
Thank you, yeah. Yes, thanks, Gethzi. I reserved that for you people to ponder on. Yes, but definitely, yes, that is how I did as well. So, yeah, it is rereading with the whole of the story from, that's how I said I identified with, that's when I stopped, because I just wanted you to explore that. So, identifying with one of the women of the land, Sarah, narrated the whole story, retold the story from her perspective. Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah, from her perspective, yeah. As a feminist retrieval, some feminist retrieval happens, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Going back to your origins in India, what is the situation in Christian churches? Is there any remnant of a caste system, or is there any rejection of it, or how do things spell out now?
yeah, I think it's Dalit scholars or even historians have traced that until 19th century that there had been different pews for Dalits and the caste-oriented people. I won't call them as caste people because I don't want to exalt them as caste people, caste-oriented people. So that is what history says. But I think now some of the Dalit theologians, they say now the situation is even worse with the Brahminic rule in power. You know, so there is. So I think it is still there. And did you say something about remnant, Doug? Did you say something about remnant?
The rejection, I think I said.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm not hearing you properly. Yes, the rejection, yes, I think still there are churches, maybe even if it is not in open ways, there would be in subtle ways that there would be the discrimination happening.
See,
And-
part of the background of my question is
Mhm.
that William Carey
Yes.
translated the Bible into numerous languages, but
Mhm.
he did translate it into Hindi,
Mhm.
and he used Hindu terminology.
Oh, I think it is the same. It is with even with many of the Hindu terminologies had been used in translations, and even sometimes they say there is efforts to translate. There is efforts to translate biblical texts without Hindu terminologies,
Yeah.
but I don't know how far it's successful because of. In initial days, as you said, because the only learned people were the Brahmins, so they had to sit with the Brahmins and they had to, for example, one instance I can give you, in English Bible it would be like in the Transfiguration narrative, when explained about Jesus's cloth, dazzling like snow or something white.
White, yes.
Yes, in the Tamil Bible particularly it will be like no washerman could, something like that. So so to maintain that hierarchical order, so this work is only for this group. So it is particularly mentioned that it is not just the
not that no one could bleach.
Yes,
This
yeah.
is the washing thing.
So because particular castes were not particular caste, untouchables or the Dalits were assigned certain jobs, certain jobs, mostly menial jobs, and then Sudras, the servant class, are to serve the upper three castes, so like that, so still. It is there in the Bible, in the Tamil Bible, perhaps in the Malayalam Bible, could be, I'm not sure.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Gethzi.
Oh, no, Ezra.
Oh, I'm just thinking that imaginative narrative that you've prepared. I just wonder if you've explored having that published by itself, as a, as something that people could use as a reflective sort of meditative read.
Definitely, that's what I was thinking. Because to be honest, with the examiner's report initially, I was a bit, bit down. So that didn't allow me to take my thesis, but my supervisors were extremely happy. And as you know, Liz Boas, who's been to Melbourne now, and she's continuously insisted me that I had to publish that, so that is how it should be. And one of the examiners had strongly recommended for publication of that thesis. So, so it's not a big deal. But at that time it was a bit upsetting. Later I was okay, but it took me some days to overcome that. So, but the examiner said that it's not that it shouldn't be awarded, it should be awarded, but so and all those things. So at that time it was a bit tricky to focus on publishing with this emotional upset going on, but later, now thank you for asking me, Damien, because now when I started to prepare, I was thinking, what's fascinating, so I guess when you read that, you think, oh, how good it is, so I should have done that earlier, so thank you, but I will be thinking of the truth, yes, I'll be doing that too.
That'd be great.